I became a delivery driver and discovered the terrifying truth behind haunted streets. I never should have opened that door. My hands trembled as I parked the van in the shadowy alleyway, surrounded by a veil of night. The chill in the air cut deeper than any autumn breeze. I could almost feel the whispers of stories untold pressing against my skin, urging me to turn back. But I didn't listen. Curiosity always got the better of me. My day-to-day routine was simple: pick up packages, deliver them, repeat. That's what I dreamt of when I took this job: peaceful evenings and discreet deliveries. What I found instead were streets filled with shadows, darkness creeping into every corner like smoke. The streets whispered secrets. Old homes loomed, their windows cracked like broken eyes watching me. I remember feeling something sizing me up from the depths of those empty structures. It started small. The first delivery was to an abandoned house. The door creaked open like a warning. I noticed the air grew thick with an overwhelming scent of decay, mingling with something sweeter, like moldy fruit left too long. I felt the hairs on my neck stand, prickles of fear coursing through me. The delivery went smoothly, but the moment I turned my back to leave, an odd noise caught my attention: a scraping sound, like fingernails on wood. I whipped around, heart racing. Nothing. Just darkness. Then things escalated. Packages I delivered started appearing back in my van, as if rejecting their destinations. I drove down streets I'd been on countless times, but tonight they seemed different, twisted. The streetlights flickered ominously, shadows dancing briefly before disappearing into the night. I felt like the walls themselves were closing in. With every turn, I could hear a low echo, haunting and familiar, growing louder. It felt like a tangible presence. I wasn't alone anymore. My breath quickened. My pulse raced. There was a weight to the air that settled in my chest like a stone. I finally reached my destination, a crumbling building sitting at the end of a narrow passage. As I stepped out of the van, the shadows seemed to shift, pulling together into a swirling mass. I swallowed hard, feeling a lump in my throat. I grasped the package tightly, nails digging into the cardboard. Just as I stepped closer to the door, a figure appeared at the edge of the darkness. A fleeting glimpsy face masked by shadow, eyes glowing like dying embers. I froze, heart pounding in my ears. And then, the door slammed behind me with a deafening bang. I spun around, panic flooding my veins. Silence engulfed me, thick and suffocating. Where had they gone? I stood on the edge of something terrible and unknown. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The stillness wrapped around me like a shroud, pressing in until I could hardly breathe. That shadowy figure had vanished, but the memory of its hollow eyes seared into my mind. I turned, my back now against the unforgiving door, as if whatever lay behind it was a safer choice than facing the darkness outside. A gust of wind stirred the leaves littering the ground, whispering tales of lost souls and the echoes of something malevolent lurking just beyond the edges of reality. I squinted into the blackness, desperate to find any sign of life, but all that met my gaze was the remnants of a life once lived: shattered windows, broken fences, and the ghosts of memories I could almost hear flittering like fragile moths. Steeling my resolve, I approached the door, fingers trembling as I embraced its cold, hard surface. What I felt on the other side was a pulse, thumping like a heart beating against flesh. I knocked, the sound echoing like a call to arms in this forsaken place. Silence answered, but the air shifted, crackling with anticipation. Then came a voice, low, distorted, as if it were being dragged from the depths of a swamp. "You shouldn't be here," it murmured, the words wrapping around me with a chilling comfort, like a snake squeezing its prey. Who are you?" I stammered, my voice quaking under the weight of my fear. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. I heard drawers opening and closing inside, the slamming of doors, and a quick, rhythmic tapinga sinister percussion that mapped my every heartbeat. The door shifted, creaking as though something was moving just behind it, deciding whether I was worthy of entry or deserving of fear. I took a step back, awareness surging through me as the atmosphere thickened. It felt like being in the mouth of a predator, with only the tension to remind me of the danger I faced. Suddenly, the door clicked open, revealing a chamber cloaked in shadows, as if the very essence of darkness had bled out from its corners. Against the backdrop of feeble light, a figure emerged, tall and gaunt, adorned in tattered clothes that seemed to cling to him as desperately as I clung to sanity. His face was gaunt, features twisted into a mask of sorrow and rage, like a painting of despair lost to time. "What do you want?" he hissed, each syllable steeped in venom, woven with a despair that twisted in my gut. I could barely muster a whisper in response, my voice caught in my throat. But as I stood there, paralyzed, the shadows began to shift once more. They dripped from the ceiling like wet ink, pooling around my ankles, crawling up my legs. I felt the murmurings of the house growing louder, voices layered with despair, begging for release. "Leave! Leave now!" the man cried, but his voice dissolved as the shadows writhed and surged, transforming into a grotesque chorus of faces, mouths stretched wide in silent screams. Panic surged within me, primal and fierce. I turned, scrambling backward toward the heavy door, now my only chance at salvation. But the door slammed shut before I could reach it, the echo reverberating through the hall like a death knell. I spun around, chest heaving, adrenaline fueling my every move. My eyes darted to the windows, now fogged over like gazing into a molten abyss. The shadow man's face twisted into a snarl as he prowled forward, a hunter ensnaring his prey. "You opened the door, now you're part of it," he rasped, the shadows swelling around him, hungry. Suddenly, the voices crescendoed into a frenzied howl, a symphony of sorrow clashing against the walls, vibrating through my bones. Light flickered sporadically like dying stars, and for a brief moment, I saw figures appearing in the corners of my vision. Shadows merged with reality, each wearing the face of despair. I darted for the back of the room, heart pounding, when I came across something grotesque, a wooden panel, slightly ajar. Voices screamed at me to open it, to unveil what lay behind, echoing the terror that pulsed throughout the darkness. But uncertainty gripped my heart. I could feel the shadow man's breath against my neck, hot and acrid like smoke. "Choose." he growled, a clawed hand outstretched toward me. "Reveal the truth or join us." As the panels creaked open, an icy wind surged through the room, pushing the shadows back and unveiling a narrow passageway lined with flickering candles. My body moved on instinct, shoving into the darkness. But as I crossed the threshold, a deafening crash resonated from behind. The voices swelled again, a cacophony of anguish. My heart raced, and then, the passageway behind me collapsed in on itself, shadows surging forward, a monstrous wave of terror. I sprinted down the corridor, the panic bubbling within me. But at the end loomed a flickering lantern, light spilling like a salvation. But could I trust it? My heartbeat echoed in the silence, and before I could reach it, a familiar figure threw open a door at the end of the hall, eyes blazing with otherworldly fires. The last thing I heard was my own scream mingling with the howling darkness, as the shadows swallowed me whole. As the shadows closed in, a blinding veil of darkness enveloped me, suffocating and thick, pushing the air from my lungs. I tried to scream, but the sound was sucked into the void, replaced by whispers that clawed at my sanity. I felt my feet leave the ground, weightless and powerless amidst the spiraling chaos. Then, abruptly, I found myself sprawled on cold, damp earth, the ground trembling beneath me as if alive. I gasped for breath, the sensations crashing into me like waves against a ragged shore. My heart raced as clarity came in fragments. I was no longer in the chamber with the shadow man. I looked around, blinking against the dim light of a pale moon, casting ghostly silhouettes upon a graveyard, headstones jutting out of the ground like jagged teeth. The cemetery was alive with shadows that danced between the graves, each movement punctuated by a faint murmur. I heard names being whispered, urgent and pleading, calling for attention from the world above. "Help us, help me." My mind raced back to the figure with the tattered clothes, the distorted voice begging for me to leave. Now I was here in a nightmare realm, where the tormented souls grasped for the warmth of the living. I stumbled to my feet, the chilling realization sinking in. Where was the light? Where was the exit? Suddenly, an air thick with melancholy stilled, and all sound faded, leaving an oppressive silence that threatened to crush me. I turned and saw it, a seam of light flickering in the distance, beckoning with an almost siren-like pull. But it wasn't just a glow, it was a beacon of hope, or perhaps a trap. Before I could decide, a rustling drew my attention. From behind a crumbling mausoleum, a figure emerged, lanky and distorted, like a wraith in the fog. I squinted into the shadows, adrenaline pushing me to run, but something held me rooted in place. I recognized the face, it twisted in anguish, mouth open in a silent CRYMY, own reflection warped by fear. "You must listen." A voice implored, yet the figure's lips didn't move. Instead, I felt the words deep within my bones, resonating with the echoes of my past, memories that clawed desperately for acknowledgement. "We are trapped like the shadows, you cannot escape until you free us." With a tremor, I stepped back, disoriented. The realization crashed over me that these echoes were fragments of those I'd lost, their whispers rising in a chorus of desperation. They hadn't found peace, and I could be their only link to the world of the living. But what did it mean to free them? "Join us, help us." The wraith's face morphed into the likeness of my sister, eyes wide with panic, screaming silently. No. I willed myself to refocus, to reject the suffocating pull of despair. I turned towards the beacon of light, now flickering more intensely, beckoning me to approach. But as I took a tentative step forward, my foot snagged on something, and I stumbled into the dirt, landing beside a grave overgrown with weeds. Glancing at the headstone, my heart plummeted. It was adorned with names I recognized but never wanted to see again, friends lost, family ripped from my hand by cruel fate. I clawed at the earth, digging deeper as if to unearth their souls from this cursed ground. If I could just find a way to reach them, perhaps they could guide me out of this horror. As my fingers grazed a cold, metallic object beneath the earth, a distant wail shattered the silence, and the ground trembled violently. Shapes began to emerge from the graves, lifeless figures clad in shrouds, their faces obscured but pulling closer, hungry, restless. "Join us," they moaned, and in that haunting chant, the weight of despair settled upon me like a grave shroud. I felt their cold fingers teasing my hair, pulling me toward the chasm of madness. Panicking, I grasped the objector rusty key, heavy with dread. Could this lead me out, or was it just another deception woven by the shadowy figures? The wailing grew louder, the faces twisted in angry currents of grief. I could feel the earth stirring, ready to consume me and everything I loved. I sprinted towards the flickering light, but the figures lunged, shadows stretching and pulling, threatening to claim me as their own. "Help us!" they screamed in cacophonic unison, their hands reaching out, desperate to snatch me away from the land of the living. With the key gripped tightly in my hand, I neared the lighter doorway cloaked in a shimmering veil. Was this a passage to safety, or a portal to damnation? As I reached for it, an icy hand clasped my wrist, yanking me back as I felt my heart falter. "No. You cannot leave without us." The wraiths cried, their voices overlapping in a chilling symphony that crescendoed in a frenzy of despair. And just as I thought I found my salvation, my vision darkened, the shadows closing in a world of grief and horror ready to swallow me whole. I was caught between the agony of lost souls and the flickering light, and with a final heave I was torn backward into darkness as the key slipped from my fingers, clattering to the ground. The door burst open, and a blinding light engulfed everything. Voices screaming, a mix of pain and pleading swirled around me, and in that moment, I knew I would never escape. The darkness roared as all faded away, leaving only the key lying on the ground, glimmering ominously beneath the cold stars. As the echo of my last thought hung in the air, I found myself standing once more on the edge of that accursed graveyard, the night thick with a palpable tension. The moon, now a sickly yellow, cast twisted shadows that writhed against the headstones, as if the earth was alive with sinister intent. My former escape had become a mere illusion, and dread coiled around my heart, squeezing it like a serpent. The key, abandoned in the dirt, seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, an invitation or perhaps a warning. Compelled by an inexplicable force, I shuffled closer, though every instinct screamed at me to flee back to the tattered remnants of my reality. The distant wail of restless spirits hung in the air, a reminder of the desperation that had clawed at my mind. "Help us," they tittered, their voices murmuring through the wind, carrying a blend of sorrow and madness. With a swift motion, I darted towards the grave from which I had pulled that accursed key. The earth churned with restless energy beneath my feet, as if it yearned to rise and consume me whole. I dropped to my knees, hands clawing at the dirt until I felt cold fingers brush against my own. In that instant, I froze, paralyzed by fear and guilt as a figure emerged from the soil, a woman in a tattered dress, her face contorted in anguish, eyes void of light. "Find us," she rasped, her voice hollow and echoing as though it originated from the depths of the grave. "Lead us home before the darkness claims you." I blinked, shaking my head, attempting to deny her plea, but it was too late. Her cold fingers gripped my wrist, dragging me further down, into a submerged world where the boundaries of reality clashed with visceral nightmares. With each heartbeat, a cacophony of whispers twisted around me, threading through my thoughts. Names flew through the air, soft but sharp, lacerating the fabric of my stability. Family, friends, the faces of my past flashing like strobe lights, each reminding me of my failure to protect them. No. "I'm not here to stay," I cried, struggling against her grip. But the more I fought, the harder she pulled. We were locked in an unholy dance, and it was as if the cemetery itself had come alive, urging me to join the ranks of the damned. In a moment of frantic clarity, I recalled the key, gripping it like a talisman against the oncoming tide of despair. I fished it from my pocket, its cold metal glinting ominously as she gazed at it with a mixture of longing and resentment. "You think that will help you? That you could simply unlock a door and escape?" Her laughter echoed around me, turning my blood to ice. No. I screamed, tearing away from her reach and sprinting back towards the light. But it flickered violently, now tainted with a darkness that coiled around its edges. Each step felt heavy, as if nature itself conspired against me, dragging me down into the abyss. "Join them!" The woman shrieked, a chorus of voices joining her, rising into a haunting harmony. "Be with us!" I could feel their presence wrapping around me, suffocating my will, clawing for a piece of my soul to drag with them into eternal silence. Desperation surged, propelling me towards the trembling light, and in a moment of reckless abandon, I plunged forward, arms outstretched. The moment my fingers touched the veil, I braced myself for what could be salvation or demise, and as the light enveloped me, a piercing shriek erupted from the shadows. I was swept away a torrent of color and sound, but through it all, a terrible tugging pulled at my core, a whisper twisting in my mind. "You cannot leave alone." With my heart racing, I collided with an unseen barrier, splintering my consciousness into a million fragments that echoed through the cold night. I gasped for breath, but no air filled my lungs. Instead, I found myself in a darkened alleyway, damp with the scent of decay. The world was muted, colors washed away to bleak tones, and ahead, figures emerged from the shadows, their faces familiar yet terrifying. They were the lost faces from my past, grinning with an unsettling hunger, a grotesque mockery of life. They beckoned me closer, their laughter twisting the very fabric of reality around us. "You're one of us now, aren't you?" they crooned, their voices dripping with malice. "You came for help, and now we'll help you find your way." And just as I turned to flee, the ground beneath me cracked and split, the alley yawning into a chasm that swallowed all light. I was caught in a tempest of voices crying and laughing, being dragged toward the abyss. Then, the most horrifying realization seized me. I was the delivery driver, tasked not with parcels, but with the souls imprisoned by this realm. My heart thundered as the ground jerked violently beneath me, leaving me teetering on the brink, the shadows creeping closer. In that moment, my screams echoed futilely against the walls of the chasm as I felt hands reach up from the depths, twisted, gnarled manifestations of loved ones long gone, binding me tighter with their anguish. With the last ounce of strength, I scrambled back, only to catch sight of the key glimmering in the darkness below, pulling at my very being. And just before the darkness consumed me entirely, I understood the truth. I was never meant to escape. I had only just begun to deliver the terror that lurked in the haunted streets. The air thickened with dread as the echoes of laughter faded, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat thumping frantically in my ears. I was no longer in the alley, but suspended between worlds, teetering over the abyss, where whispers of the forsaken wove through the fabric of my reality. Ahead of me loomed a door, ancient and weathered, its wood twisted and warped as if it had absorbed the pain of countless souls. Its brass handle shimmered, tauntingly familiar, like a forgotten relic of my betrayal. With a surge of instinct, I lunged for it, the key in my pocket seeming to pulse against my leg, resonating with the door's energy. The shadows churned violently around me, beckoning with familiar voices that slithered into my thoughts. My mother, my brother, shrouded in darkness as they cried out for help, yet their cries morphed into cruel laughter that echoed cruelly in my psyche. Leave them. I roared, not for them but for myself, fighting against the chilling grip of guilt that threatened to pull me in. I had failed them once, I couldn't turn back now. I gripped the key, heart racing, and thrust it into the lock, coaxing it to yield under its own will. As the key sank into the depths, the door creaked and shuddered, a low moan emanating from it, alive and malicious. A gust of frigid air blasted me, and the door swung open to reveal a portal of darkness swirling with torment and temptation. Enter, the void murmured, wrapping around me, and claim your truth. I stepped forward, the cold closing in around me, and found myself in a place that shimmered with ghosts of memories both sweet and bitter. A shimmering street lay before me, lined with houses I recognized all too well, each one a home, alive with warmth, laughter, and security. I had once belonged here. Yet, as I moved closer, the scenes peeled back like layers of rotting flesh, revealing a nightmarish undertow beneath the facade. Those long gone strayed in and out, their faces twisted into expressions of agony and longing, the teasing light of existence flickering like candle flames, barely illuminating their hollow gazes. They reached for me with skeletal hands, faces twisted in a grotesque parody of smiles, their mouths moving in silent screams. "You were supposed to help us," they chorused, their voices a harrowing symphony of despair. "Please," the words faltered on my lips, my legs trembling as I was drawn closer to the very homes that had once felt like sanctuaries. I could feel the weight of their pain resting upon my shoulders, and the shadows around me thickened, pressing in, disarming my will. I turned to run, fear igniting in every fiber of my being, but the path behind me was consumed by an immeasurable darkness that seemed to breathe. Around me closed the streets lined with the echoes of lives untouched by my care, each one yearning for the deliverance I denied them. Despair clawed at my heart, a relentless whisper entwined with regret, telling me that I could not escape this. The voices changed, shifting from desperate pleas to horrible laughter, loud and manic, echoing in the void surrounding me, drowning out reason. "Stay with us," they sang in unison, their tone dripping with irony. "Deliver your descendants to the dark." With every step I took, the darkness warmed like flames licking at my back, inviting, insidiously promising peace and release from my haunting guilt. But I willed myself away despite the siren call that pulsed through my veins. The love of family twisted into an unrecognizable hunger. Then I saw her. A shadow moving amongst the cacophony. The woman from the graveyard, her eyes like empty pits of despair. She reached toward me with impossibly long fingers, her body trembling as if she were linked to the horror that surrounded us. "Find the door to the truth," she breathed, "or become a deliverer of eternal nightmares." Her gaze bore into me, unyielding and full of intensity. I felt her presence, beckoning me to choose. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath my feet, the pavement cracking like thin ice. I was falling, slipping into a pit of writhing souls, and above, I could see her grasping the edges of the chasm, pulling herself up as darkness threatened to take her as well. "Don't let it take you," I screamed, my voice swallowed by the suffocating shadows. Her eyes widened, and I grasped at the key in my pocket, its power radiating through me, and for just an instant, I thought of twisting it into a new door. But as I plunged deeper into the void, I felt invisible hands clamping around my throat, pulling me back toward the sound of immense, maniacal laughter that was both my own and the echoes of those I had failed. The ground beneath me shattered, opening up into an even deeper chasm of despair, and there, at the edge of understanding, where darkness beckoned with promises of release, I felt a flicker of hope die in my chest as I recognized the terrible truth: only the key could save me or condemn me forever. But the choice would not only rewrite my fate but perhaps the fates of many who had called this cursed realm home. My scream got lost in the cacophony, leaving me hanging over the abyss, wrestling for breath, when suddenly I noticed the ground beneath the darkness shifting, trembling with something dark and alive. I tried to pull away, but the earth grabbed my feet like chains, and the horrifying realization flooded through me: reality was fracturing, and I was at the center of it all. As I met the engulfing darkness head-on, it whispered one final command that stole my breath: become the driver of what comes next. And just like that, the darkness swallowed all light, leaving me in a void beyond comprehension, my fate hanging in the balance as the new chapter of terror unfolded. I drifted in the infinite void, where silence pressed against my consciousness like an insistent hand. The darkness around me pulsed, a living entity that shuddered with anticipation, whispering secrets that pulled at the frayed edges of my sanity. Each breath I took felt weighted with dread, as if the very air was laced with the cloying scent of decay. Then, the stifling gloom began to shift. A faint glimmer emerged, a flickering light that danced like a candle flame snuffed out by an unfathomable wind. It was not comfort, it was a beacon to a truth I feared to confront. The whispering grew louder, drawing me closer. In a moment of defiance, I surged ahead, propelled by desperation and fueled by the remnants of hope. As I drifted toward the light, I found myself in a street, familiar yet grotesquely altered. The buildings were skeletal, their facades peeling away in layers like dying leaves. Shadows twisted through the windows, writhing and contorting into shapes that grinned with infinite malice. The laughter, both joyous and sinister, echoed in a chilling chorus, reverberating off the walls like the haunting remnants of long-lost celebrations. A delivery, a soft voice trailed off. I turned, heart racing, to see a figure cloaked in rags, hollow eyes boring into mine. It was a child, no more than 7, her face smeared with dirt and tears. "They're waiting for you," she whimpered, pointing a scrawny finger down the street. "For the driver waiting?" "Waiting for what?" I stammered, glancing nervously at the shadows that curled around her like tendrils of smoke, ready to engulf her. "They sent the invitation," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "for you to deliver what you owe." The child swallowed hard, her gaze never wavering. The world around me warped, shimmers of past horrors flooding my awareness, faces long gone, cries cut short, and echoes of promises made over graves. "You're in this too," the child asserted, her tiny frame brimming with a burdensome weight. "You're never free from them." A heavy fog rolled in, shrouding the towering shadows. In the distance, I caught glimpses of late-night delivery swirling around spectral figures, ghostly hands reaching for boxes filled with memories and dread. Each box bore a name: me mother, my brother, and names I had long buried. I staggered back, my mind a tumult of regret and dismay. I can't deliver those memories. I can bear the weight," I shouted, panic coursing through me as a wave of icy air swept past. "They need them," the child cried, her voice rising sharply, morphing into a high-pitched wail. "You owe them for what you've taken, for who you've lost." With each word, the ground trembled beneath my feet, and the specters surrounding me twitched, their agony palpable as an invisible force yanked at my very being. I looked down the street, where shadowy figures congregated, their eyes aglow with a hunger that felt familiar. "God, no," I gasped, but it was too late. The door behind me shattered with a thunderous clap, and the street warped into an unspeakable reflection of my own fears. I was trapped in a looping nightmare that pulled on my essence, forcing me to relive not only my failures but the malicious laughter of those I had wronged. Before I could resist, the child seized my hand, her grip bone-tingling cold. "You don't understand. The truth isn't the end, it's what they want." Her eyes shot to the horizon where a growing shadow threatened to overshadow the flicker of light. Suddenly, an ear-splitting sound shattered the silence, a cacophony of voices shouting, shrieking, pleading, and taunting. I turned back to see them, specters emerging from the thick fog. They drifted toward me, anguished as their translucent forms twisted and contorted under the burden of rage and regret. "Deliver us!" they echoed, their voices intertwining into a malevolent symphony. The malice in their tone left no room for compassion. They wanted my soul, they wanted vengeance. With dread pooling in my gut, I looked into the child's eyes, desperate for guidance. But as I searched her gaze, I saw a reflection of my own despair. She was one of them, trapped and longing for release, and each moment I lingered only tightened their grip. A looming figure rose among them, crawling closer with a deliberate stride, its face obscured but recognizable by the suffocating presence surrounding it, essence of my own guilt. It held a package, a box that pulsated with darkness, a delivery meant exclusively for me. "Now, will you deliver, or will you become the delivered?" The voice was deep, like the rumble of thunder before a storm, each word laced with an unsettling melody that promised endless suffering. Panic surged through me as I stood paralyzed, the chill of the streets icing my bones as I glanced back at the shadowy figures, their hands extended eagerly, yearning for liberation or perhaps for my damnation. A decision loomed, shrouded in inevitability as I edged toward the box, the last remnant of a world too far gone to salvage. No longer my choice of delivery, this was my accusator, and time ceased to exist as I grasped the box, feeling it pulse, living, breathing, the fate of everyone entwined within. And before I could make sense of the question that hung unspoken, the shadows surged forward, threatening to envelop me in an unforgiving embrace. Make your choice. Their chorus thundered, drowning out reason. As the darkness descended, I felt my grip slip. I could hardly breathe, but one chilling thought clamored for attention. If I became that which I dreaded, what horrors awaited not just me, but those who desperately awaited my delivery? And then I felt it a tear in reality, the world fracturing around me, and the ground beneath me gave way once more. But this time, I was not falling alone. I was not just the driver, I was the harbinger of something far more terrifying. My scream mingled with the cacophony of the damned, echoing in the swirling shadows, and as I plummeted into the abyss, a sharp gaze met mine from the depths, filled with malice and hungry anticipation. Welcome to your delivery. The descent was agonizing, every second stretching as if time itself had fractured. But instead of the cold embrace of oblivion, a sharp pull seized me, twisting my body in a torrent of darkness until I landed with a hard thud on a surface that resonated beneath me, like a heartbeat. Gasping, I struggled to focus through the suffocating haze that clung to my skin. When my eyes adjusted, I found myself in what appeared to be a dilapidated warehouse, filled with the scent of mildew and an underlying metallic tang. The walls were adorned with peeling posters that depicted smiling faces, advertisements long forgotten promising joy and elation. Instead, they stared blankly back at me, mirroring the haunting demise of hope. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting ominous shadows that danced like specters upon the concrete floor. My heart pounded as I scanned the room, ears straining against the unsettling silence, the absence of the howling winds I felt preceding my fall. And then I saw them, the boxes. Hundreds, if not thousands, stacked haphazardly, each bearing a name handwritten in a spidery scrawl that crumbled with the weight of despair. Some were familiar lost friends, family members, promises. Others were alien, titles that seemed to whisper stories of darkness, sins, and secrets buried long ago. I staggered to my feet, the cold recognition pulsing through me like an electric shock. Each box was not mere cargo, they were fragments of lives intertwined with mine, burdens I had ignored, ghosts I had tried to forget. The one at my feet caught my attention, a small cardboard package that felt strangely warm, a name etched upon it, Sarah. My breath hitched, a bitter taste clung to the back of my throat as memories flooded forth. Sarah, my childhood companion, who had stood by me, laughter ringing like chimes in the summer air until the very day she vanished. The echo of her voice calling my name, her laughter fading as swiftly as it had appeared. All the times I told myself I was too busy to help her, too absorbed in my own wretched existence. This box was a reminder of everything I had lost and everything I had let slip through my fingers. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, and I turned to see shadows crawling across the walls, merging and twisting like the tortured souls I had abandoned. They writhed hungrily as if each one knew their names, knew what they had come to reclaim. Deliver us. Their voices rumbled with the weight of infinite sorrow, each syllable dripping with anguish. It seemed the very fabric of the world heightened their pain, rippling around me like a storm brewing at sea. Please, I begged, backing away from the boxes, from the leering shadows that lunged toward me with a mournful wail. I can't. The words caught in my throat as a chill crept through the air, trailing the vicious shadows as they danced closer. With a violent rattle, a door swung open at the far end of the warehouse, revealing a pale figure. Clad in a tattered conductor's uniform from a different era, his skeletal face was illuminated by the dying light above, and a smirk carved into his lips sent a shiver deep into my bones. He gestured toward the rows of boxes, his hand steady as if that dreadful invite was calling me forth. Only you can decide what stays and what goes, driver, he intoned, his voice low and dripping with mockery, as though I were a child playing a game with terrible stakes. But understand, each box is not just a delivery, it houses souls desperate to be set free for vengeance. Horrified, I stumbled back, the weight of dread bearing down on my shoulders. What do you mean? I gasped, half terrified to hear the answer. His eyes gleamed with hunger, and he stepped further into the light, revealing more of himself. His skin was a canvas of decay, each movement invoking the putrefied stench of death. The ones you lost, the ones you let go, wait for you. The memories you owe are not merely burdens. They're anchors to their pain, and now, they're craving release. No. I can go through with this, I shouted defiantly. But even as the words left my mouth, the memory of Sarah loomed in my thoughts, eyes pleading, voice whispering for salvation. A rumbling laughter erupted from the shadows, the chorus of the damned echoing my sentiments, "You will deliver. It's only a matter of time before they come for you, driver." With sudden resolve, I tore my gaze from the figure, rushing past the boxes and deeper into the warehouse, unable to shake the sensation that something was watching, waiting just beyond sight. The air thickened, twisting with the weight of my fears until it coiled tightly around my throat. "That one you cannot forsake," he called after me. "They will haunt you until you make amends, until you satisfy their craving. You are far from done." I pressed onward, heart racing as the shadows flared behind me, angry wails like shrieking banshees filling the air. I had to escape, but even as I fled, an inexplicable pull drew me back toward the boxes. I needed to confront their secrets, my truth was locked within. With every frantic step I took, the shadows grew denser, shoving against me as if alive, eager to drag me back into their infernal embrace. Then, as I glanced over my shoulder, a truth struck with sickening clarity. The shadows were not mere phantoms, they had faces, me face, contorted in torment, overlapping visions of who I once was. In one final surge of desperation, I sprinted toward a corner of the warehouse, intent on finding an exit, but there, at the threshold, stood a massive iron door, adorned with chains, an ominous barrier that pulsed like a heart. An inscription scrawled along its surface trembled with an energy that surged through me. "Secure the package or enter the boundless darkness." And as I reached for the handle, darkness enveloped my vision, the shadows swirling in a tempest, suffocating all light. A myriad of faces swarmed behind me, could feel them, pushing, demanding, forcing me to confront the unspeakable truth I had long avoided. "Will you abandon us again?" Their voices hissed, a symphony of loss echoing in my ears. The iron door rattled violently, threatening to rend asunder. I grasped the handle, heart hammering as I prepared for the choice that lingered, freedom or entrapment. Then, without warning, the walls began to bleed shadows, the hues of despair pouring forth like ink spilling from a shattered pen. The figures twisted in agony, their forms smearing into grotesque shapes that clawed at my very essence. I stood at the precipice of my salvation or annihilation. And as the darkness surged, something deep within me coaxed forth an answer, laced with anxiety and trepidation, something worth delivering. It was time to confront my past, or forever remain a delivery driver in the haunted corridors of my fears. Adrenaline surged as I pulled the iron door wide and faced whatever lay beyond. As the iron door creaked open, a blast of frigid air rushed to meet me, carrying with it a cacophony of whispers, dozens, no, hundreds of voices, overlapping and intertwining, each one tinged with despair. It was an unholy chorus that clawed insistently at my sanity, demanding attention, seeking release. What lay beyond the threshold was a crooked hallway, walls adorned with strange symbols that twisted and writhed, as though alive. The atmosphere felt thick, suffused with an overwhelming sense of loss and dread. The flickering lights above buzzed more aggressively, dimming to near blackness before blaring back to life, illuminating the path ahead just long enough for me to see the echoes of long-forgotten horrors trapped within the walls. With every hesitant step, the whispers grew louder, their words sounding almost like chants that echoed in my bones. My pulse quickened, each thump ramping up the sense of dread that gnawed at my core. It felt as though the darkness coaxed forth memories, secrets I had buried, each revealing itself like a festering wound, laughter that had once filled my home, childhood games that slipped away, betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. "Do something," the voices urged, rising to a fever pitch, drowning out any remaining threads of rational thought. "Set us free." I abruptly stumbled, heart racing, my fingers brushing the damp wall. It felt almost warm, throbbing like a living organism. Images flashed through my mind, Sarah's bright eyes, the day she vanished, my last glimpse of her fading into the mundane chaos of life. Guilt gnawed at me, black and gnarly like creeping ivy, wrapping around my throat. "Make your choice," shouted one voice, piercing through the din like a shard of glass. Are you the driver or the bound? With mounting urgency, I pressed onward, driven by the need to confront this madness. I was trapped within a labyrinthine nightmare, but if I could find the heart of this place, perhaps I could uncover the truth behind the packages, the shadows. They were all connected to my own fears, my own memories. As I turned a corner, the hallway opened into a larger chamber, an expansive space filled with towering shelves brimming with innumerable boxes. My breath caught a familiar sight, but there was something more sinister surrounding it. A flickering glow emanated from the center, growing and pulsating, as if some unspeakable power was gathering strength. In the heart of the room stood a podium, draped in shadow, where an oversized ledger lay open, swirling mist curling around its edges like smoke. The pages whispered secrets I felt I shouldn't hear, betrayals, deaths, abandoned promises stretched back for decades. And right above the ledger, perched atop an ivory pedestal, was an unmarked package that seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. "Me package.no, I murmured, backing away, dread filling me to the brim. It called to me, this box I had avoided, yet it filled me with the terror of unraveling that which I had held so tightly. My sins, my regrets, the darkest corners of my mind. Open it. The shadows surged forward, their forms undulating like smoke in a gale. It's your truth. Only through it can they find rest. I hesitated, dread pooling in my stomach. This was no mere package, it was a door into my past, and I was terrified of what lay on the other side. Tremors ran through my hands as I reached for the box, its edges warm against my palm, sending shivers of recognition up my arm. Before I could think, voices erupted from the shadows, Sarah's voice ringing clear, cutting through the torment. I trusted you. Don't let me suffer alone. Panic surged through me. I was teetering on the brink of an abyss of my own making, and the walls quaked with desperation as the room began to tilt. Open it! They clamored, a roar of urgency and despair that felt like a reckoning, their faces merging, twisting, pleading. But as I braced myself for the lid to peel open, the ground beneath me quaked violently, throwing me off balance. Behind me, the iron door slammed shut, sealing the only way back, casting me deeper into this living nightmare. Welcome, driver, sang the shadows, their voices reverberating like a macabre symphony. It's time you made your choice, and with a deep breath, my fingers trembling wildly, I lifted the lid. The darkness swelled, the whispers crescendoing into a frenzy. Time froze, and I felt as if depths of ancient despair were born forth. Within the box, a glowing object pulsed, revealing images, faces, and moments from my past. My heart sank as every ounce of hope was sucked away, darkness rushing forth to claim what was its own. But just before my eyes could drink in that terrible truth, a piercing shriek filled the chamber, echoing against the very fabric of existence. Everything around me shattered, shadows erupted in chaos, swirling violently, pinning me in a blinding vortex that veiled my senses, and as my vision blurred, the last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me whole was a spectre emerging from the mist, a figure with hollow eyes and a mouth that stretched into a wide, bone-chilling grin, chasms of agony beneath its gaze. Welcome back, driver, it's time to deliver. And then silence. The silence was suffocating. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, churning with dread and confusion as the world around me began to fade into a murky void. I was weightless, suspended in darkness, an echoing absence that smothered all senses. Then, like a flickering candle, shadows snaked across my vision, rekindling remnants of familiarity mixed with nauseating fear. Gradually, the expanse of shadow coalesced into a shape, becoming a stark, oppressive room pulsating with a sinister undertone. My surroundings felt different, the ambience textured with malice. The scent of wet earth invaded my senses, clinging to my skin like a shroud. I blinked against the oppressive dimness, struggling to orient myself. When my eyes adjusted, I was horrified to realize I stood in a cramped, decaying room strewn with remnants of past horrors, photographs torn and yellowed with age, their faces scratched out, forgotten toys eerily coated in dust, and walls lined with dark stains that mocked the faintest hope of cleanliness. At the far end hung a mirror, cracked across its surface, each shard revealing a piece of a reality I could scarcely bear to confront. From the corner of my mind crept the whispers, arguing, a desperate undercurrent weaving through the fabric of my disorientation. Find us, remember, they urged, soft and yet so very, very close, brushing against the back of my consciousness like icy fingers. It was as if multiple souls were tugging at the threads of my memory, every pull unraveling deeper fears and losses. Suddenly, the floorboards moaned under my weight, as if in conversation with the spirits lingering in this realm. Hesitating, I stepped toward the mirror, compelled to peer into its shadowy depths. My reflection faltered as I approached, the edges distorting into grotesque shapes that morphed with unsettling fluidity. Just as I reached out to touch the glass, the whispers coalesced, louder now, forming chilling words that clawed at my sanity. "You left us. You must atone." The mirror surged with vibrant light, and without warning, an icy hand wrapped around my ankle, pulling me downward. I tumbled, crashing towards the ground, but when I hit the floor, I felt nothing, their impact swallowed by the inky darkness. I didn't land, I was consumed, drawn deeper into the abyss as the shadows twisted and coiled around me. My surroundings shifted violently, and I found myself in a sunlit street, its warmth mocking the chill still lingering deep within me. But this wasn't the street I remembered. The houses wore expressions of decay, their once bright facades now draped in shadows that writhed as though alive. There was an insidious sense of discomfort brewing just beneath the surface, and the gnawing awareness that I was no longer in control clawed at me. I stood there, rooted in place, as all at once the laughter of children erupted from somewhere unseen. The sound pierced my heart, stitching warmth and sorrow together. I felt an urge to move towards it, drawn by the echoes of innocence and the memories of my past. Why did it resonate deeply now? Before I could regain composure, a shadow darted across my field of vision. I strained to glimpse the figure, a reflection of a small girl, tugging at my heart with haunting familiarity. "Help me!" she screamed, her voice a blend of desperation and anguish. But when I stepped closer, she vanished into the air like smoke, leaving jagged fragments of sorrow in her wake. And then the whispers returned, a maelstrom of sorrowful cries spiraling around me. "Deliver us! Set us free!" The specters chanted, their voices weaving tales of betrayal and despair that gnawed at my very soul. Each howl tugged at memories of Sarah, the day she vanished, stretching out like an eternal night. Instinctively, I turned toward the nearest house, the door ajar and flickering with a sickly yellow light that beckoned. As soon as I stepped inside, my breath froze. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, and I was enveloped in shadows that exaggerated the horrors hidden within. The air tinged with the taste of iron, and I could hear faint echoes of distant screams that clawed at my resolve. The interior bore witness to a lifelong extinguished. Old pictures festooned the walls, but the faces were smudged and unrecognizable. Another door awaited, this one ajar and dripping with disquiet, leading into a darkened hallway that seemed to stretch infinitely. I took a step forward, and suddenly, the chilling grip of the shadow demon pierced through the building, an overwhelming fear unfurling like foul smoke. "Leave now or suffer the weight of their fate." It lured, the echoing voice muddled with the cries of the forgotten. Just then, an unearthly howl rent the silence, vibrating the very ground beneath me, and from the corners, dozens of anguished faces emerged, eyes hollow and mouths agape, wails of terror erupting all around. No more hiding. "Deliver them!" The spectral faces surged forward, eyes blazing with longing and rage, forcing me back against the wall as the door behind me slammed shut with an ear-splitting roar. In that moment, with spirits pressing close, the air became thick with the scent of decay. I recognized them, those lost fragments of my past, mingling with their own. Each spectre was a story, a forgotten life that unspooled before me, blending into the living nightmare as they screamed, "Find the heart! Free us!" Panicking, my heart surged in desperation as I turned to the hall that beckoned me, each pulse resonating with my fear and determination. But before I could decide, the floor rippled, and the room quaked, shadows swirling chaotically, a cacophony of tortured souls demanding justice, demanding deliverance. Suddenly, the lights flickered fiercely, and a ghastly visage emerged through the chaos, a hulking figure, grotesque and warped, locking its bloodshot gaze with mine. "You have a choice, driver. But choose wisely, for the lives of those spirits rest upon your scars." And just as the shadows converged, a blinding surge of light erupted before me, a force crashing against the darkness. The choice awaited, and I felt the walls close and teams suspended between reality and madness. Would I face my past? Would I finally confront the truth behind Sarah? With one foreboding pulse, I was propelled into that blinding abyss, waiting for the imminent break of dawn or the end of everything. I stood on the threshold, my heart racing as the blinding light receded, leaving behind the oppressive darkness that threatened to consume my very soul. The hushed whispers grew louder, coalescing into a sinister melody that threaded through my mind. You are the driver, they hissed, their voices a chilling echo of each wretched existence that had passed through my life. Deliver us, or be delivered. The air thickened with anticipation and dread, and instinctively, I reached for the shadows, for the remnants of memories waiting to be claimed. I was torn between the anguish of lost lives and a yearning to escape, but this was a choice rooted deeply within my soul. Then, among the phantom figures swirling with restless energy, one shadow moved with Claritia Child once more, the same girl I had glimpsed earlier but now standing before me. Her eyes were wide with that innocent fear, the very embodiment of the cries I had heard. "You can help us," she pleaded, her voice quaking with urgency. "You hold their lives in your hands. Who? Who are they?" I gasped, breathless from the weight of despair pressing in. Each figure that spun around me seemed to pulse with need, a reflection of my failures, of those I had neglected, leaving them to rot in their grief. I felt the pain of their silent screams clawing at my heart. "The spirits that linger, they await your deliverance," she cried, pointing toward a series of boxes stacked precariously against the wall, each one marked with familiar names, each a symbol of my neglect, a package of guilt delivered by my own hands. "You must release them," I hesitated, fear anchoring my feet to the ground. "What if I can't? What if I fail again?" Her small face twisted in anguish, yet it was filled with fierce determination, an echo of something I once possessed before the shadows encased me. "You must face what you fear. Find the truth within those boxes or be trapped here forever." In that moment, clarity flooded through me, understanding that reached beyond this life and the next. The only way to shift the chains binding our souls was to confront the very essence of my past. I turned toward the wall of boxes, which loomed like a fortress, each one waiting for acknowledgement, each one a door leading to pain that had long since turned to darkness. With trembling hands, I approached the first box, the name Sarah emblazoned on its side. Swallowing hard, I braced for the memories that surged around me, like a storm poised to strike. I peeled back the flaps, a wave of cold air flooding out, and within lay a trinket, a cracked bracelet, laughing memories enclosed in its fragile shell. I held it tightly, her laughter ringing in my ears. "He was there for you," the whispering shadows echoed, a harmony of agony and yearning, testing my resolve. "But why didn't you save him?" Everyone saw me as the driver of packages, of guilt and regret. But the truth surged forth like a tidal wave. I was also the accuser, the one who had let those pieces of life slip through the cracks, those fires extinguished too soon. Unraveling the darkness, I opened more boxes, revealing photographs of happy moments now tainted, memories twisted beyond my grasp, each one a reminder of abandonment and pain. I stumbled back as the room began to twist, shadows melding into grotesque figures, demanding and clawing, each voice blending before me. "Suffer alongside us," they screeched, their laughter mingling with my heartbeat, drowning me in a sea of torment. With every box I opened, the fear morphed into resolve, coaxing loose the chains that bound them and me. For every memory I faced, I felt a little lighter. With every shred of agony addressed, the shadows shrank, twisting and writhing as they grappled with their own truths. But just as light flickered beyond the shadows, a guttural roar vibrated through the very walls. The darkness intensified, shadows writhing with a fury that sent cords of pain splintering through me. The hulking figure I had encountered before emerged from the dark, ethereal tendrils wrapping around me, threatening to shatter the fragile safety I had fought for. "Enough! You think you can set them free? You must pay the price for their release," it growled, the very essence of despair pulsating around us. I felt its icy breath, a promise of eternal torment, an echo of every life I had neglected. And just like that, my will faltered. "No. I won't be a part of this. I won't become like you," I screamed, my voice drowned out by the sound of chaos. I gripped the bracelet tighter like a talisman against the encroaching darkness, grounding myself in the memories of how it felt to matter to someone, to be present in their lives. In that moment, the shadows erupted in anguish, grieving what had once been a cacophony of sorrow that clawed at my sanity. "You cannot escape your fate. Each soul has a price," they howled, surging forward like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me in their collective despair. And yet, I stood firm, pushing against the aching void, feeling the weight of what I had lost infused in each heartbeat. "No. I will not deliver despair. I will deliver hope," I roared, a wild surge of defiance burning within me. I reached back, finding the heart of my truth, and with a single thought, I shattered the last box in my path. A light burst forth from within, scattering shadows like dust, yet those lost souls emanated a warmth, a collective sigh of relief whispering through the air. Thank you, thank you. The darkness peeled away as they merged with the light, shining brightly as they left their anguish behind. The hulking figure shrieked, a twisted scream merging with the echoes of the released souls, and in an instant, it crumbled into nothingness. Only silence hovered around me now, a calm after the storm that had raged for so long. As I stood surrounded by the remnants, my heart calmed, a peculiar sense of liberation washing over me. The burden, the guilt I had felt for so long, began to evaporate like mist in the morning sun. But as I turned to leave, a creeping dread coiled around my heart. The ground lurched beneath me, fissures forming in the earth, and I realized with sudden horror that the boxes had reformed. With each thundering heartbeat, fear surged through me. Deliverance was not complete, the darkness would always linger. Until my time came, I would forever tread the haunted streets, the driver of lost souls, standing at the precipice of existence. And as I took my first steps back into the light, I felt a chilling reminder echo within me. Fear lingers, waiting for the next driver to deliver their curse. The last flickering shadows whispered in dark mirth, you cannot escape, this is only the beginning.